Marcus Cole hadn't done anything but walk. But the patrol car behind him flashed its lights before a single polite question was asked. It didn't pass him. It crept along the curb, matching his pace, as if the act of him continuing to walk was a problem in itself. On the clean, wide street, with almost no one out on their porches at that hour, the way the car tailed a lone man on foot was more obvious than the flashing lights on its roof. By the time the loudspeaker crackled, the question wasn't where he was going. It was why a man walking was being stopped before anyone said what he'd done. Tuesday afternoon, Marcus was walking down Elm Street in an old grey sweatshirt, dark jeans, and worn-out running shoes. His hands were in his pockets at first, but he pulled them out as soon as he heard the loudspeaker. Stop. He stopped. Marcus turned slowly, hands away from his body. He didn't take another step. The patrol car parked at an angle behind him. The driver's door opened. Erin Shaw got out, one hand near her hip, the other held out in front, palm down, holding him in place. Keep your hands where they are. Okay. Marcus stood still. He was 42 years old. Broad shoulders. No hat. No bag. No phone in his hand. He looked at Erin, not at the car. What are you doing here? Walking. Erin didn't look at the monitor in her car. She looked from his shoes up to his shirt, then glanced down the street behind him. You live around here? No. Then what are you doing here? Clearing my head. She took half a step forward. Be more specific. Marcus didn't change his stance. Hands still out. His voice was even not too fast. Not too slow. I've got ID. If you need it, don't reach for anything. He gave a short nod. Just then, a black SUV braked hard behind the patrol car. The door flew open almost immediately. Travis Boone got out. He didn't walk around. He cut straight through the space between Marcus and the front of the car. Erin leaned aside, as if ceding her position to him. What's going on? Doesn't live in the area. Just walking. Offered to get his ID. Marcus turned his head just enough to see. I said times if times you needed it. Travis gave him a quick look, from his face down to his hands. Then his eyes stopped on the sweatshirt pocket. You pull it out when you're asked. Marcus didn't answer right away. He kept his hands right where they were. I'm standing still. Travis took another step. His heel stopped near the toe of Marcus's shoe. Erin was off to the left. The angle of the stop changed completely then. One man in front. One officer to the side. There was no more room to walk. To the car. I haven't done anything. To the car. Now. Marcus looked at the hood of the car. Then he looked at his own two hands. He took a slow step forward. Didn't drag his feet. Didn't look back. When he was right up against the car, Travis pointed down at the metal. Hands on the hood. Marcus placed both hands on the hood. No one asked for his name first. No one asked where he was coming from. No one said if there had been a call. No one ran his name for a preliminary check. The ID was still in Marcus's pocket. The offer to show it had been made. But that step was skipped right there on the pavement. Travis stood close behind his right shoulder. Erin moved to the left, her eyes fixed on Marcus's arm. All three of them had finished repositioning before any basic verification had begun, and from the moment Marcus's hands touched the hood, his ordinary walk was no longer just a walk. Marcus kept his hands on the hood as Travis shifted his stance one more time. Erin moved in closer on the left. Her hand touched his wrist first. Travis didn't ask any new questions. He just looked at Marcus's profile, as if the rest was already decided. Put your hands behind your back. Marcus did. Erin pulled his left arm forward. Travis held his right shoulder, forcing him down against the hood of the car. The metal cuffs clicked shut behind his back. Marcus didn't struggle. He said only one thing as the cuffs were pulled tighter than necessary. I'm not resisting. No one answered him. Travis spoke louder than he needed to, as if he wasn't talking to Marcus, but to some recording device on the dash. "Stop resisting." Marcus went quiet after that. The back door of the patrol car opened. He was put into the plastic seat in the back. His knees hit the edge of the front seat. The handcuffs were snug behind him. With no room to shift, Erin got in the front passenger seat. Travis drove. The car pulled away from Elm Street with no siren. No further announcements. Marcus looked through the cage. He couldn't see his own reflection in the glass. Just the traffic lights sliding by in rhythm. Travis spoke first. Tomorrow he'll tell a different story. Erin let out a short laugh. Probably say he was just out for a walk to clear his head. Marcus didn't interrupt. He sat as straight as he could, kept his wrists still, and watched the clock on the dashboard as the car turned off the main road. When the car stopped at the back entrance of the Oak Ridge station, the sky had gotten a shade darker. Marcus was led through a narrow hallway, through a metal door, and then to the booking desk. The overhead lights were bright white. A document scanner sat right on the edge of the counter. Its small light was still on. A landline phone was further in, its coiled cord dangling next to a logbook. Erin dug through her sweatshirt pocket, pulling out her keys. A mint. And then a thick, worn leather wallet. She opened the wallet, looked inside, and then hesitated for just a beat. Travis held out his hand. She gave it to him. He flipped the wallet open. A metal badge and a federal ID were in the innermost pocket. Facing up, clear enough under the lights, the officer behind the counter stopped writing. Someone else looked up from a computer screen. Erin looked from the ID to Marcus's face. She didn't say anything right away. Marcus straightened up as much as he could with his hands still cuffed behind him. His voice was as steady as it had been on the street. "There's a verification number on the back." No one reached for the phone. Marcus spoke again, more briefly. "Make the call." Travis looked at the ID longer this time. Then he folded the wallet halfway, held it with 2 fingers, and lightly tapped the edge against Marcus's cheek. Twice. Not hard. Just enough for everyone at the desk to see. Then he tossed the wallet onto the counter. Fakes are getting pretty good these days. The officer behind the counter didn't laugh. Erin looked at the document scanner. Then, at the desk phone. And only then did she turn to Travis. "Maybe we should just call." Travis turned his head toward her. "Fast. Nobody's calling anyone." Erin went still. Her hand dropped lower, her grip no longer as firm as it was when they first came in. Marcus didn't look at Travis. He looked straight at the phone on the counter. "You just have to read the number." Travis planted both hands on the edge of the counter, leaning forward slightly, as if to block both the scanner and the phone. "I don't need you to tell me how to do my job." A silence hung over the counter. Not long, but long enough for everyone there to see the right next step was sitting right in front of them. And no one was taking it. The scanner's light was still on. The phone sat where it was. The ID was still open on the counter. Nothing was missing. Except for one single action. The officer behind the counter pushed the logbook a little closer. "What should I write down?" Travis didn't look at Marcus anymore. "Write down resisting arrest. Write down suspicious behavior. Write down impersonating an officer if you have to." Erin turned to him. "You haven't checked it." Travis tapped his fingertips on the counter. A single, dry sound. "I said, write it down." Marcus lowered his eyes to the open wallet. His voice was still low, unhurried. "If you put me in a cell after seeing that, this isn't going to end here." Travis yanked his sweatshirt straight, turning him away from the counter. "Take him in back." 2 officers came from a back door. They took Marcus by both arms and pulled him through the steel door at the end of the hall. Marcus didn't resist. As he passed the counter, he glanced one last time at the phone and the scanner. Its light still on. That's when breaking protocol was no longer something happening out on the street. On the street. They hadn't even seen his ID. In here, the ID was on the counter. The verification number had been pointed out. The tool to confirm it was right in front of them. But the steel door to the holding cells still opened. And Marcus was pulled through before anyone made a single phone call. The steel door shut behind Marcus with a short, heavy thud. It was colder in the room than in the hall. The overhead light wasn't off, but it was just dim enough to keep everything in shadow. A concrete bench was built into the wall. A metal toilet stood in the far corner. Marcus sat in the middle of the bench, his feet flat on the floor, his back not quite touching the wall. They had kept his sweatshirt and shoes out front. The marks from the cuffs were still visible around his wrists. He didn't bang on the door. He didn't call for anyone. He just sat there, looking through the small window in the door, like a man waiting for exactly what he knew was coming. At the federal building, Dana Brooks looked at the tracking screen again. Marcus's safety check-in was late. His vehicle's tracker showed it hadn't moved. His personal phone. However, we had. Dana called over to the tech desk. A dot lit up. The location stopped inside the Oak Ridge station. She picked up her desk phone. "Get me the watch commander." The answer on the other end was slow. "Oak Ridge station. Dana Brooks. Federal agent. Put your shift supervisor on the line." Now. There was a short silence. Then the line went dead. Dana put the receiver down. She turned to the agent nearest her. "Get a car ready." At the same time, Chloe Parker sat on the edge of her bed, her phone in front of her. She replayed the video from the traffic stop. She nudged the volume up one more level. Marcus's voice was clear at that specific part. He'd said he had ID. He'd said they could verify it. Chloe took a picture of the digital clock in her kitchen, then uploaded the entire video to a secondary account. Not to the local news. Not to anyone she knew in town. Inside the station. The phone started ringing non-stop. One officer stared at a monitor. Another peered out the front glass doors. Erin stood to the side of the counter, her eyes fixed on the ID scanner, which had been lit up the entire time. No one had touched it. Less than 6 hours later, the scene in front of the station had completely changed. White headlights flooded the front windows. Federal vehicles blocked the entrance from both sides. Federal agents walked straight into the processing area. No small talk. No listening to long explanations. The servers, cameras, shift logs, dash cam videos, booking logs. Everything was seized that night. An evidence box was placed on the counter. One agent read out the evidence number for each item. Another slapped a seal on the computer drive bay. Dana walked in last. She didn't look at Travis first. She looked at the desk phone. Then she looked over at the ID scanner. Still sitting right there. "Where is my agent?" No one answered right away. Dana turned to the officer standing closest to the holding cell door. "Open it." When Marcus walked out, his gray sweatshirt was handed back to him. His shoes were placed on the floor in front of his feet. His old leather wallet was sitting on the counter. He opened it, took out his federal badge, and clipped it to his belt. The whole processing area went silent right then. No further explanation was needed. The real ID had been on the counter before. The verification number had been pointed out before. It wasn't the information that had been ignored. It was the verification process. Erin took a step back. Travis stared down at the counter. Nobody mentioned anything about a fake ID anymore. The next morning, 17 names were gone from that unit's shift roster. Door access, computer logins, file cabinets, patrol cars. All of it was locked out of their old accounts. Their badges were dropped into evidence bags. The nameplate on Travis's office door came down before noon. The following week's duty schedule was reprinted with a long list of empty slots. A few months later, the city signed a $10 million settlement agreement to close out the civil suit and the related federal case. The city's reserve fund took a major hit. Property taxes were readjusted. The next city council meeting was standing room only all the way out into the hall. The old structure of that unit no longer existed. Travis Boone served 10 years in a federal correctional facility. His pension benefits were forfeited. Marcus didn't keep his portion of the money. He transferred the entire amount to a legal aid fund for victims of wrongful detainment and improper asset seizure. On the final day in court, Dana walked with Marcus down the stone steps outside. She asked him what was next. Marcus adjusted his shirt cuff, looked down at the sidewalk, and just said it was a nice day. He thought he'd go for a walk. My personal observation is that a lot of these cases don't fall apart because of one big thing. They fall apart because there was one small step that could have been done right. But someone chose to ignore it. If that were you, with your real ID sitting right on the counter and them still refusing to verify it, at what point do you think the video footage becomes more powerful than their words? If you think this is a story more people need to see, please share it, leave a comment, and subscribe to the Silent Rise for Justice channel.